Good day, everyone. Welcome to our lesson for today on communication and globalization. Globalization and global are terms we often encounter today. These terms are associated with realities outside the territories of nation or states. All countries are engaged in globalization. Very few, if there is any, societies are unaffected by this phenomenon, and that because of this, we need to understand exactly what it is, and more importantly, how it impacts communication. In this lesson, we are guided with the following objectives: explain how cultural and global issues affect communication, and discuss the impact of communication on society and the world. In simple terms, globalization is the process by which people and goods move easily across borders. Principally, it is an economic concept, the integration of markets, trade, and investments with very few, if there is any, barriers to slow the process or of products and services between nations. There is also a cultural element as ideas and traditions are traded and assimilated. Globalization has brought many benefits to many people, but of course, not to everyone. To help us understand and explain the economic side of globalization, let's take a look at the well-known coffee chain, Starbucks. Okay, the first Starbucks outlet opened its doors in 1971 in the city of Seattle. Today, it has at least 15,000 stores in several countries, perhaps 50 countries. These days, you can find a Starbucks anywhere, whether Australia, Cambodia, Chile, or Dubai, or in the Philippines. It is what you might call a truly globalized company. And for many suppliers and job seekers, not to mention coffee drinkers, of course, this was a good thing. The company was purchasing 247 million kilograms of unroasted coffee from 29 countries. And that through its stores and purchases, it provided jobs and income for hundreds of thousands of people all over the world. But then disaster struck. In 2012, Starbucks made headlines after a Reuters investigation showed that the chain, or this particular coffee chain, hadn't paid much tax to the UK government, despite having almost 1,000 coffee shops in the country and earning millions of pounds in profit there. As a multinational company, Starbucks was able to use complex accounting rules that enabled it to have profit earned in one country taxed in another. Because the latter country had a lower tax rate, Starbucks benefited so much from it. Ultimately, the British public missed out as the government was raising less tax to spend on improving their well-being. Now, question: how did globalization happen? We might think of globalization as a relatively new phenomenon, but it's been around for centuries. It's been around since our ancestors. One example here is the Silk Road, that map over there on the slide. When spread rapidly between China and Europe via an overland route, merchants carried goods for trade back and forth, trading silk as well as gems and spices, and of course, coffee. In fact, the habit of drinking coffee in a social setting originates from a Turkish custom, an example of how globalization can spread culture across borders. And today's time, we've been many of us uh, drink coffee in a coffee shop to discuss things, or to socialize among our friends. And that is one of the examples, how much globalization affected culture across borders. Now, what drives globalization? Globalization has speeded up enormously over the last half century, thanks, of course, to great leaps in technology. The internet has revolutionized connectivity and communication and helped people share their ideas much more widely. Just as the invention of the printing press did in the 15th century. And the advent of email made communication faster than ever, especially so now that we are doing our classes online where we communicate often with the use of our emails. The invention of enormous container ships now, which also help us a lot in the importing, transporting goods across the world. In fact, many improvements in transport, generally faster ships and trains and airplanes, have allowed us to move around the globe much more easily. Now, if we look at globalization, we come to think about what are the goods, what are the benefits, that globalization has brought to us or has been offering to us. Globalization has led to many millions of people being lifted out of poverty. For example, when a company like Starbucks, okay, when they, with their purchases of buying coffee from farmers in Rwanda, for example, it is providing a livelihood and a benefit for the community as a whole. A multinational company's presence overseas now contributes to those local economies because the company will invest in local resources, products, and services. Okay, and so they are generating jobs as well, employments for those people in that particular area where Starbucks is located. Socially responsible corporations may even invest in medical and educational facilities. Globalization has not only allowed nations to trade with each other, but also cooperate with each other as never been before. Take the Paris Agreement, for example, on climate change, where 195 countries all agreed to work towards reducing their carbon emissions for the greater global good. However, while some areas have flourished with globalization taking place, others have floundered as jobs and commerce moved elsewhere. Steel companies, for example, in the UK, once thrived, providing work for hundreds of thousands of people, now has suffered a lot and had caused loss of job to many of the employees there. Okay, with China began producing cheaper steel, steel plants in the UK even closed down, and so thousands of jobs were lost during that time. Every step forward also in technology brings with it new dangers. Okay, but although computers have vastly improved our lives, cyber criminals steal millions of dollars a year with the proliferation of cyber hacking as well. Global wealth has skyrocketed, but so has global warming. While many have been lifted out of poverty as one of the benefits that globalization has brought to us, not everybody has benefited. And that is very true. Many argue that globalization operates mostly in the interest of the richest countries, with most of the world's collective profits flowing back to them and into the pockets of those who already own the most. So it intensifies the divide between the poor and the rich. Mostly those people benefiting from commerce, from businesses around the world have been, are the rich ones, are the richest countries. Okay, the money is flowing back to them into their pockets and less are given to the poor. Although globalization is helping to create more wealth in developing countries, it is not helping to close the gap between the world's poorest and richest nations. Leading charity Oxfam says that when corporations such as Starbucks can legally avoid paying tax, the global inequality crisis worsens. Basically, done wisely, in the words of the International Monetary Fund, globalization could lead to unparalleled peace and prosperity. Done poorly, it could lead to disaster. So, how do cultural and global issues affect communication? What then is the point of bringing up all this news that I mentioned that dominated the media over the last few years to you as students of purposive communication? Now, the issue in Starbucks, the issue in UK that I have just mentioned. So, what's the point of bringing all this to you? Simply, um, that in all the preceding news, in all the issues that I've mentioned, social media have played in a vital role in playing them up in the public eye, and that cultural and global issues now weigh in heavily on how we communicate with each other. When different applications like Facebook, which of course all of us are into it right now, Twitter, social involvement began to figure like never been before in all sides of any story that got the attention of the public. Just like how it worked with the ABS-CBN, as how it also worked with Starbucks about the issue on tax. It was like all of a sudden the expressive ability of anyone who can type words and say their piece in writing, and even though through video, increased to really unimaginable level and won over all other media when it comes to putting out in the public their ideas, concepts, point of views on just about anything that is deemed controversial. So the internet allowed conversations ranging from one to many, many to one, and many to many. Just like, the very issue that took a run on social media recently about Nas Daily and that of Wang Od. So it took around social media that, many people have engaged into discussions, okay, they are and they voiced out their ideas, their point of views about the matter the matter at hand. It is, however, noteworthy that today, if you are not ready to receive backlash, okay, on social media, or what is now loosely called as flack, okay, you should not think of posting how you think and feel, because in doing so you are courting possible cyberbullying or a bunch of trolls to haunt your online existence. So this is another matter to which communication bends and stretches according to the dictates of the times, associated with um hype up online communication via social media platforms. In fact, another issue that I would like to speak about is that earthquake incident that happened in China. Don't know exactly when it was, but during the height of that 7.0 earthquake in China, Chinese authorities lost control on how its citizen trooped to social media to vent how they felt about the natural disaster. And so, while China's internal media tried to curb the excessive increase of the expressive ability of Facebook and Twitter users in their country, their online community persisted on bringing to the world audiences the real situation in their country with which irk the Chinese government. Now, this, of course, was one serious reason why Facebook has been banned in China. Now, it was inevitable that the global community, which thrives online, weighed in on the issue and of the alleged mishandling of the disaster situation there and took the discussion of the matter to global scale. So the Chinese government is never the same again when it comes to social media, and so is communication in the country in general. So that led to banning of Facebook in China. Furthermore, in all of the news about acts of terrorism in US and Europe, it was no longer just television running the show of informing the public the latest news. A live television news or now feed on what the online global community has to say through personal Facebook posts and latest tweets of the next average show, or what we call smart aleck, like the all-knowing kind of person. So the pattern of how deluged of messages through online or global community usually begins with heads of states tweeting or posting in their social media accounts how they sympathize with other heads of states experiencing either natural or man-made calamities, especially with COVID-19. This is also predictably followed by regular individuals doing the same to the extent of changing their profile pics to flags of disaster stricken a nation, or sympathy by um, using badge. Okay, so now the lines that divide what heads of state or even celebrities post on their social media account and the posts of a regular citizen have been blurred because anybody can just use his or her social media account at any given time without bounds set by the cyber laws. On the other side of the coin is that online communication, as we have seen happening, breeds trolls and trolls. I'm sorry, trolls. These are people who plant discord on the internet by initiating arguments. We know what these are, right? These are people who initiate arguments, posting hurtful, off-topic, outright upsetting messages with the intent of sowing hatred in the online community. This is one downside of of the community this generation has built. While majority tries to bring about healthy communication among its members by putting out messages of sympathy and support for developmental reasons, there are, of course, sectors who do otherwise. In fact, the US government and their investigations on ISIS terror attacks in major cities of the US always reveal that there is an active jihadist online community that focuses on breeding jihadists anywhere in the world. So, or actually, they call it extremist. I would prefer call extremist rather than jihadist. It's something else. The US government had to grapple with this, and so did other nations like Europe. Online experts have yet to develop a foolproof solution to subvert this threat to no less than world peace. Okay, and also apart from that, another concept to look into is the concept of global village by Mcluhan uh, in 1984, which describes a world that has been shrunk by modern advances in communications and that vast networks being likened of communication systems to one extended central nervous systems, ultimately linking everyone in the world. And also it refers to an idea in which one part of the world could be experienced from other parts in real time, which is what human experience was like when we lived in small villages. So today, after more than a century of electric technology, we have extended our central nervous system itself in a global embrace, now abolishing both space and time as far as our planet is concerned. Marshall McLuhan predicted the global village, one world connected or interconnected by an electronic nervous system, making it part of our popular culture decades before even the first DSL lines were installed. Marshall McLuhan was the first person to popularize the concept of global village and to consider its social effects. His insights were revolutionary at that time and fundamentally changed how everyone has thought about media, technology, and communications ever since. McLuhan chose the insightful phrase global village to highlight his observation that an electronic nervous system or the media was rapidly integrating the planet. Okay, events in one part of the world could be experienced from other parts in real time, which is what human experience was like when we lived in um, small villages. But before while Mcluhan popularized global village is a concept, he was the first to think about the unifying effects of communication technology. In fact, one of the earliest thinkers along this line was Nicholas Tesla, who in an interview with Collier's magazine in 1926 stated that when wireless is perfectly applied, the whole earth will be converted into a huge brain, which in fact it is, no? All things being particles of a real and rhythmic whole. We shall be able to communicate with one another instantly, irrespective of distance, okay, no matter, regardless of how far we are from the one we're communicating to or the one we're communicating to. Not only this, but through television and telephony, we shall see and hear video call. No, we can hear and see one another as perfectly as though we are in a face-to-face communication setup, despite intervening distance of thousands of miles, and the instruments through which we shall be able to do this with, to do with the people that we love. So distance wouldn't be really a concern when communicating, since we have this technology that unifies us. Okay, so that's global village. It's like a nervous system communicating, linked and to one another, that it appears as if we lived in small villages together. Okay, together, today, after more than a century of electric technology, we have extended our central nervous system itself in a global embrace, abolishing both space and time as far as our planet is concerned. That's according to Mcluhan and Understanding Media 1964. So, question, how was communication back then and now? So when the printing press was invented in 1400s, everyone thought it was what modernity was all about. Just any of us would think the same, perhaps. Okay, that was perhaps the the high end thing, and everyone one could possibly get. Okay, only to find out that the invention of telegraph soon followed printing press. So soon after, telephone began to invade homes and offices all over the world, which made communication even faster and and more convenient. This, however, is uh, this, however, is history when photography was introduced in 150 years ago, followed by the invention of an even mainstream medium, the television, that was 100 years ago. So television enjoyed many years of dominating modern media until the cyber world was born. In fact, I can remember vividly, um, in our hometown back then, if one could get at the TV, how we could actually, that's one of the luxurious thing one household could get, only to find out later that there could be more technologies. There are technologies invented, and so where cyber world was born, the internet, that we all enjoy now, is part of its as part of the dominating modern media that we all experience. The rest, of course, is again history when internet slowly crept into the life of every human being in the world, one person at a time in an unprecedented manner, especially now that every one of us mostly is are doing online classes. So in a span of 20 years since the internet was invented, the media landscape is still changing. It's very true. The internet, which introduced to us the term real time, like we're going to have a synchronous session today. So that means that we're going to have a video conference call real time. So becomes really a name that we often heard nowadays. So in a click of a button, local news items immediately becomes global news, mag-trend, viral over social media. There are no more walls to separate what is of national importance and what is of global interest. Once anything is posted, even if it's a second ago, a minute ago, and put out there through online technology, social media, Twitter especially, there is no stopping it from being liked or unliked, commented on, or much more widely shared, okay, or retweeted in the Twitter world. Okay, so you, the millennial reading this, hearing this particular lesson would make you realize how much really communication and globalization works so much in our lives today, that you would even say that this generation is very permissive, because how we can freely communicate through language and different platforms that is spawned by online technology, ethical standards, that dictate that there is no absolute freedom in this world, despite, of course, the privileges afforded to this generation, with globalization and with internet technology in terms of communication. We must, of course, realize that we still have to look into language as a tool to convey messages for for well-meaning purposes, as what we are intent to as students, no, of purposive communication, because the way we communicate helps shape the community we are building for ourselves. So question: what is the relationship between the language and culture? Since we're talking about communication, and we cannot talk about communication without talking about language, nor we can talk about language without associating it with culture. So what then is the relationship between language and culture? There is a close relationship between language and culture of community. They are, of course, inextricably related, so that one cannot understand or appreciate the one without the other. Culture may reflect in body language, costumes, superstitions, and even expression and friendliness. Although all of these definitely observe the cultural norms of a particular society, the impact of culture and language use is deep and thorough. In this context, now language refers to lifestyle of a community, the way its members behave, their beliefs, and cultures, their values, and most importantly, the way they communicate. So every act of language, guys, be it written or spoken, is actually a statement about the position of its communicator within the social structure in a given culture. So in the context of this discussion, it is community means that global community in which we inhabit. This means that the current tide of communication requires you to play an active role in forming communities, global or otherwise, for the current generation and to those who come. So again, I would like to ask the question: what then is the point of bringing all of this globalization to students of purposive communication? Simply, again, really, that in all of the preceding news, all the issues about global issues, local issues, national issues that we have just mentioned, social media, in which social media have played a very significant role in playing them up in the public eye, and that cultural and global issues now weigh in heavily on how we communicate with one another. Now more than ever, communication is really open. It is it encompasses a lot of aspects. There are several ways that we can communicate with the advent of technology, with the proliferation of online softwares. So communication is so much possible, only that how do we communicate purposively so that we can use our language as a tool to convey messages for well-meaning purposes. Because again, the way you communicate, the way we all communicate, community help we are building for ourselves. After all, in uh we are in one village, or what we call global village, the concept of Mcluhan. So thank you very much, guys, for listening. Stay tuned for the next lesson. Thank you so much. Bye bye for now.